Hello, good evening, and welcome back. All men in Alabama will be forced to have a vasectomy at 50 or when they have their third child under outrageous state law proposed by Democrat. Yes, the Democrats are at it again. This is supposed to be a pushback to their anti abortion laws, the idea being that it should be safe, legal, but rare, of course, and it shouldn't be a shout your abortion kind of thing. It should just be in emergency circumstances and not as a method of contraception. So, after all, currently, rape and incest only make up 2% of abortions. But the Democrats who say that it is the woman's body, therefore it's her choice, and the life inside doesn't matter because it is not yet a human life, that life inside should not be given any rights until it is born, or at different points depending on who you ask. But the push seems to be for up to birth abortion. Some even say post-birth abortion. So obviously it is a life at conception. I don't think that's argued. That is fact, whether or not you like it or not. It is life, just like you would say there's life on Mars. Whether or not it's human life, that's then debatable, really, if it then has the rights of a human at that current point. And some would say no. But going on to this story, the idea is to have a pushback, which they're not actually intending to put forward, although the title might suggest that they are. But it is to say, well, if you're going to be that outrageous, we're going to say something equally outrageous just to show your hypocrisy. It doesn't stand up on its own merits. It's a ridiculous notion, which we'll get into. And even to try and achieve their pushback, the way they would go about it as proposed doesn't get their point across either. So it is a bad idea followed by a bad implementation. But instead of just laughing it off, let's actually go into why it's bad. So Representative Rolanda Hollis put the bill forward in reaction to the abortion ban. Hollis said Republicans have tried to dictate a woman's body. The proposal has been branded an outrageous overstep by opponents. Men would have to pay for the enforced sterilization themselves. The Republican state Senate passed a near total ban on abortion last year, and the law has been temporarily blocked by a federal judge since October. So they weren't able to get their law passed, of course. So they say all men would be forced to have vasectomies when they reach the age of 50 or have 3 children under new law proposed by an Alabama lawmaker. So immediately, what does that mean? It means if you've got a family unit that wants to create a large family, they want to take care of them, and they want to be taken care of in their old age instead of relying on state pensions. They want a close-knit, cohesive family. Once they have 3 children, no, I'm afraid that's it. Man, now you've got to go pay to be sterilized. You can't have a big family. No. So, okay, what about over the age of 50? Are they worried that the men are then going to be having children over the age of 50 or starting to? In which case, what, it's with younger women and not women their age, then I presume. After all, they'd probably have reached menopause by then. The older the man is, the higher chance of autism, and the older the woman, the higher chance of Down syndrome. So fair enough if you're trying to protect the child from those ailments in order to encourage people to have children earlier. I don't think that's their intention, though. I'm trying to be as generous as I can. And if it isn't for men who have children with the same partner, most likely it's going to then be children who are born out of wedlock, which we know is mainly in the black community. So it seems to be trying to recreate Margaret Singer's idea, the lady who created Planned Parenthood, which Democrats support, and her idea was to reduce the black population by setting up abortion clinics and praising it in black neighborhoods. She wanted to wipe out the black race as much as possible, and she saw it through abortion. So that was her goal. That the Democrats now support her organization, but of course they say it is no longer true to its original cause. So if they intend to sterilize men who have had 3 children, then it would mainly be the black men who are being sterilized, and they have to pay for it themselves as well. So it wouldn't work, basically. It doesn't achieve what she sets out for it to achieve. Representative Rolanda Hollis, a Democrat, on Thursday put the bill forward requiring men in the state to pay for the procedure within a month of turning 50 or the birth of their third biological child. The HB 238 bill to sterilize all men in the state has been branded an outrageous overstep by critics. Yes, it is, of course. I doubt she's worried anybody's going to get her pregnant. But why is it an overstep? Well, the two are not the same, of course. That they're not suggesting that women get sterilized. No, of course not. They're actually suggesting the opposite, that if a woman chooses to have sex, then she should have the child. And I do say chooses because this doesn't include rape. Not that you should get rid of one bad action by an even worse action. Of course not. But what they are saying is that if the woman chooses to have sex with the partner, she understands the risks, and it is more risky for her than it is for the man, and because of nature, and there's no overcoming nature, and therefore you've already consented to the consequences of your actions, and one of those consequences is having children. Women have always been the gatekeepers for sex, and maybe it's sexist to me to say that they should still get to decide, because women are more idolized and revered, and that they are the gatekeepers of their own body and whether or not they have sex. Men will try and go for anything and everything because they don't have to incubate the baby inside of them for 9 months. That is how men spread their genes far and wide, and why you have twice as many female ancestors as male ancestors. Because if the males were successful, they were very successful, and if they weren't successful, then they weren't at all successful. Whereas women is more middle of the road because of the 9 months pregnancy. So yes, women should be more careful. The pill, of course, was supposed to revolutionize it, in that they then could have one-night stands. Not that they should, though, of course. Any self-respecting man wouldn't want a long-term relationship with a partner who had already had several sexual partners. Of course, every man wants a quick hookup, at least when they're young, and therefore, yeah, those women are definitely preferred by the men, and, you know, nothing against them in older age, just don't want to marry them or have children with them due to health implications. But when they're younger, men adore slutty women because, of course, who wouldn't? It's easy sex. Women don't, of course. Women hate other women who have sex easily, brand them as sluts and the like, because of jealousy. But we all know the worst abuse women get is from women anyway. And I'm not even getting into lesbian relationships here. So seeing as the hookup culture isn't good if women wants to cause a longer term relationship with somebody, it's also worth noting that it isn't good for her own self-esteem. Of course, it's more invasive for a woman to have sex than for a man to have sex, and if you can develop that willpower to overcome that immediate gratification and go for the delayed gratification, you're going to have a happier lifestyle anyway. You're going to be able to, instead of using that time drinking and clubbing and sleeping around, you can then put that into your own life, maybe your work, maybe finding a worthwhile mate, and you'll live a much happier life for it from that delayed gratification. Also, that willpower to then not give in to your carnal urges, but to develop something more meaningful to yourself. That willpower in that one aspect will then overflow into other aspects, and you'll be able to get more done and be a happier person because of it. It's doing what you're happy to have done, not just what you're happy to do. And there is a clear distinction then, that you have to build these habits which are difficult to begin with, but easy to live with. As Les Brown says, if you do what is easy, your life will be hard, but if you do what is hard, your life will be easy. So, getting back to this, and maybe that's me sexist saying that I expect women think they should be more revered given the miracle of the capability of incubating children and giving birth, and they should still be the gatekeepers for their own bodies. Nonetheless, they should be able to decide, but understand that we can't overcome nature, at least not yet, and a possible consequence of sex is pregnancy. Take that into consideration when having sex. So, Hollis says, the responsibility is not always on the women. It takes two to tangle. Not tango, but tangle. This will help prevent pregnancy as well as abortion of unwanted children, she said. Yes, so essentially saying the only way you can really have fun is sex, and sometimes you have pregnancy because of that, so we don't want that to be a consequence. We want you to be able to do whatever you want consequence-free, because we all know that's how the rest of life operates. What utter bullshit. Anything you do has a consequence, an immediate, and then it has knock-on consequences for the rest of your life. Any little action you do will most likely affect the rest of your life. So, seeing as it's something as important as sex with the possible of pregnancy, bear in mind that you should develop that level of discipline and understanding of yourself to not be putting yourself in situations such as that. So, the lady again. They say the vasectomy bill HB 238. The vasectomy bill is to help with the reproductive system. This is to neutralise the abortion ban bill. The responsibility is not always on the women. It takes two to tangle. Right there. This will help prevent pregnancy as well as abortion of unwanted children. Are we concerned about overpopulation? No, not amongst the wider community, because the wide population, not community, but the wider population does not have enough children to repopulate themselves. or is the black community more than enough? So if you are going to take this into effect, it will be for the black community, not the white community. I don't think you're aware of this because you're a Democrat, so you can't be aware of that much. But nonetheless, it is something worthwhile to consider. So the opponents were saying it's an outrageous overstep, not going into detail why at all, but just saying, oh, it clearly sounds horrible, therefore it is. It's like, okay, yeah, sure, but that's not good enough. It isn't. If something sounds horrendous, you should still question why it is bad, because there might be some radical ideas that are actually worth thinking about. So if you have something like this, at least be able to explain it away instead of just saying it's ridiculous and everybody knows that this bill isn't going anywhere. So, Randall Marshall, Executive Director of the American Civil Liberties Union of Alabama, praised Hollis for making the statement, but said the bill would not make progress. But it really does underscore the hypocrisy of Alabama's legislature in making medical decisions for women that it would never dream of making for men. And I find this whole argument ridiculous to say, oh, well, men can't legislate for a female's body. It's like, well, for a start, we're not legislating. Well, I'm not legislating at all. But men aren't legislating for the female's body. It is for the baby inside of the woman's body. And it isn't the men who are doing the legislating. It is the people who voted them in, and it just so happened to be a man who was voted in. Let's say there's a female candidate that I really support and I really like her policies. I vote for her. She actually gets in. Some of her policies are affecting male bodies and how we live our lives. I support those policies. I voted for her. At that point, when she brings those in, do I then say, oh no, actually she doesn't get to say that because she's a woman and not a man, even though I voted for her on the basis of her policies and not her genitals? Does it then not matter, even though she's doing what the voters wanted her to do, but because she's a woman and legislating against men, now it's not okay? So that's bullshit. It isn't the legislators themselves, it's how they were voted in, provided they're following the will of the democratic process. So that is a bullshit argument from start to finish. And of course, yes, they're not legislating the women's bodies, they're legislating to save the life of the baby that is growing inside, given the obvious consequence of sex. And everybody knows that when going into sex, given that sex education that we do now have in the developed world and is being pushed in the underdeveloped world as well. So, medical decision for women that it would never dream of making for men. Well, until we get the trans community in here, and we'll have the whole Swerve Turf flame war coming up in this place, we don't have to worry about that because men can't get pregnant anyway. So, there isn't one that's equal and opposite at all. But just if it makes you feel better, just know that men get longer sentences for the same crime. And legally, women cannot rape a man because you have to have a penis for rape. The worst they can do is sexual assault.